Good morning, everyone, and welcome to this morning's Low Carbon Development webinar. It's great to have so many people joining us this morning. My name's Hannah Jameson. I'm the Climate Change Programme Director here at London Councils, and I'll be chairing this morning's event. We've still got people drifting in, but we've got quite a lot to get through, so we're going to make a start. This morning, we're going to be showcasing and launching the Low Carbon Development Toolkit and the set of tools and resources that have been developed through the London Council's climate programme to support planning teams across boroughs to achieve low carbon outcomes and drive down the emissions associated with development. We're also going to be sharing some research which has been collaboratively commissioned by a group of boroughs into the policy options and viability of pursuing more ambitious low carbon outcomes. So there's an opportunity to hear about that and find out more too. For those of you who may not have come across the London Council's climate programme before, the programme is a collaboration between boroughs and their partners to develop London climate solutions that can help us all to really increase the pace and the effectiveness of our climate change interventions. We have just recently published an implementation plan, which gives you more information about the sorts of actions that we are going to be taking over the next 2 years and how you can get involved and benefit from those outputs. The climate change programme is led by London boroughs, and that's really important, and supported by London councils. It has the political support of the 32 boroughs and the City of London, and there's a really strong consensus about the ambition and the goals that we are pursuing as a city. This morning, we're focusing on just one of the 7 themes that there are within the climate programme, and that's low carbon development. This programme is led by the London Borough of Hackney, who you'll be hearing from in a moment, and we are really pleased to announce that Haringey is also joining as a co-lead for the next phase of work, and you'll be hearing from them too this morning. If you would like to find out more about the low carbon development work and how you and your borough can get involved and contribute to the next phase of work, then we're going to be hearing a little bit more about that, about how you can get involved at the end from Rob Krasowski. A little bit of housekeeping then just before we get into the main session. This session will be recorded and you should have received a notification about that. And it will be available afterwards on the London Council's YouTube channel, and we'll make the slides available as well. You'll see that the chat is open, and we would really encourage you to post your questions and your comments in that throughout. And we'll have a chance to get to some of those questions at the end in a question and answer session. Any that we don't manage to get through, we'll make sure that we collate them and feedback afterwards in a follow-up so that you get a response. But we'll really welcome your input as well. We have a fantastic panel who you can see hopefully see across the top of your screen at the moment. I'm going to ask them to introduce themselves as they're about to speak. So the first speaker I'd like to hand over to is Natalie Broughton, who's going to tell us a little bit about the low carbon development theme. Over to you, Natalie.
Thank you, Hannah. Good morning, everyone, and it's great to see so many people attending today's launch. I'm Natalie Broughton. I'm the Assistant Director for Planning and Building Control at Hackney, and I'm delighted to be here today for the launch of the Low Carbon Development Toolkit. I will shortly hand over to my colleague, Rachel Weaver, to tell you more about this exciting new resource. But before I do that, I'll provide a brief overview of the Low Carbon Development Programme. So our vision is to secure low carbon buildings and infrastructure via borough planning by 2030. I'm delighted that we have a passionate group of officers from 15 boroughs, along with other stakeholders, working together to shape and deliver this programme. We can go on to the next slide, please. This programme is our collective response to shared challenges and opportunities. We're all committed to maximising the opportunities to deliver low-carbon buildings across London and showcase what can be done to tackle climate change. We are in a unique position as decision makers to make a difference. We are able to control and influence by setting local plan policies and making decisions on planning applications. And we can innovate. Boroughs, along with partners, can promote the use of sustainable materials and construction practices. We can maximise opportunities for innovation by understanding and removing barriers. London needs new development. And just taking residential development alone, over 66,000 new homes need to be built each year in London. Given the scale of development needed, if we don't create a strong policy framework and innovate in how we approach the issues, unnecessary carbon emissions will continue to leak into the atmosphere. There are economic benefits to the work that we are doing. If we don't get it right with new build, the cost of retrofit continues, as buildings built now will not be fit for the future. There are clear economic benefits from getting it right first time. The benefits of working together on the low carbon development programme are that we have a stronger voice. We can share ideas and good practice, and we can pool our resources, and this will save us money. Finally, on inspiration, we can showcase good practice on low carbon development and use this to inspire future generations. We can move to the next slide, please. So the next two slides summarise our programme, which is structured around 4 themes of collaborate, innovate, strengthen and upskill. Under collaboration, we've been working to ensure better partnership working within local authorities across development management, policy and building control. And as the toolkit demonstrates, share knowledge between boroughs. Also under innovate, we are aiming to develop research and guidance to enable local authorities to develop low carbon policies and monitor delivery and explore the potential of low carbon technology and materials. We move on to the next slide, please. Under the Strengthen heading, we will be pushing for national changes and for the implementation of effective measuring of emissions and clarify decision-making best practice and guidance on planning and building control. And then finally, under upskill, we will also be focusing on developing the essential skills required across London boroughs. We can move on to the next slide, please. So this final slide from me summarises the priorities for the next 2 years. We will commission a report on cross-laminated timber in new development, develop training for London's planning teams on policy application, we'll support carbon offset pricing increase across London boroughs, and encourage borough guidance for residents for achieving low carbon in conservation areas. And then finally, as this session today is about, the launch of the toolkit for guidance and resources to enable London borough planning teams to ensure low carbon development. I'm really delighted now to hand over to Rachel, who will tell you more about the toolkit.
Thank you, Natalie. Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us here today. I'm Rachel Weaver, a Senior Strategic Planning Officer for the London Borough of Hackney. I'm very proud of the work undertaken by an amazing group of officers to prepare this toolkit for London local authorities. The planning framework in London around climate change is complicated and has changed substantially in the last few years. It's driven in part by building regulation changes, a new London plan and technological advances. And the planning framework is also going to keep on changing. New buildings in London will stand for a long time. They need to be ready for the impacts of climate change and not contribute to climate change. They need to be low carbon. Can we move to the next slide, please? The toolkit is a collaborative response to help us get to better low carbon planning outcomes. It is shared learning and knowledge from across London local authorities. It has been developed for policymakers, development management officers and sustainability officers, and there are others that will also help. It provides best practice, expert guidance and practical steps. Different items will have particular resonance for different users. The toolkit is a central resource for London authorities. It saves boroughs spending time and money to gain these insights. By sharing information, it encourages consistency across London in terms of policy making and decision making. It will also provide understanding which will help to drive higher standards and very much needed carbon standards. What you can do, share the toolkit through your networks, give us feedback, because the toolkit is iterative. We really welcome your thoughts on what else is needed. And also get involved with the Low Carbon Development Programme, because we'll get better results if we work together. Can we move to the next slide, please? So what are you going to find in the toolkit? I'm going to take you through the toolkit now and what it offers you in your roles within London local authorities. The toolkit will be hosted on the London Council's website and you'll be able to find it there. So far, the toolkit covers 13 themes. This is an exhaustive list. We hope to add to and adapt the toolkit as we go forward. So under each topic in the toolkit, which you're not looking at right now, there you will find the name of the document, a link to the document, and a description of the document. So the first theme is evidence and links on low carbon development. These pages contain links to important evidence and web pages in the sustainability sector that local authorities can use to gain understanding and develop an evidence base for low carbon development. The second theme is policy development and how to move from low carbon to zero carbon. These documents identify what needs to be included in policy terms to be either a low carbon or a zero carbon policy. In addition, a key issue that all London boroughs are encountering on measuring carbon emissions using Part L or by moving to a different pathway is also set out. The third theme is elements needed for developing sustainability policies. This is a guide on components of an evidence base needed for policies on low carbon development. This includes what evidence can be provided to support the policy, including the key content that's needed. Then we move to international, national and regional policy sustainability framework. And this is setting out the wider policy context and framework that sits behind climate change and sustainability policies. The next two items in the toolkit have been developed to help officers in pre-app discussions on circular economy, whole life carbon and energy statements. This effective guidance provides surety and clarity to officers undertaking these conversations with applicants. The Model Policies Review contains examples from a number of local authorities on a range of sustainability policies, including overheating, circular economy, energy efficiency, renewable energy, and embodied carbon. They make a useful knowledge base for boroughs developing their own more detailed policies. There is also a helpful matrix on design stages and the associated sustainability principles. Looking at model conditions. Conditions on sustainability are a developing area for local authorities, needed to support the application of policy effectively. Examples of detailed sustainability conditions, covering many sustainability angles from a number of different London local authorities, are found here. With key performance indicators, sustainability policies are relatively new for many boroughs, and in order to get the most out of the policies, to see what is being achieved, it is important that the policy. This document sets out suggestions for the key performance indicators that can be used for monitoring aspects of sustainability policies. Sustainability questionnaire. This text can be used to create an online questionnaire on low and zero carbon for planning departments and officers. The information that it gathers can help work out what training is needed in-house to upskill the planning team. Viability costs and sustainability policies. Sustainability requirements through policy and building regs are generally felt to negatively affect viability costs. This document gives an overview from local authorities that have already assessed the impact on viability costs. Legal agreements and carbon offsetting particularly. It is important that financial agreements effectively mirror a local authority's climate change aspirations and policies. Here is an example on wording for Section 106 agreements for carbon offsetting and a tracking system for carbon offset payments. And then finally in the toolkit, we have the best practice and process for planning officers. This is a list of considerations for implementing best practice for delivering low carbon development throughout the planning process, for example, at pre-app, at planning stage and at condition stage. That is a summary of the contents of the toolkit. I hope you'll find it really useful. I will now hand over for a more detailed look at the pre-app checklists and their benefits.
Thank you, Rachel. Hello, I am Nicola Tully and I work in the policy team at the London Borough of Camden, and I will introduce the pre-application and full planning checklists. So here the toolkit includes pre-app checklists for use of applicants and officers, and they will prove really useful tools, providing early indications of an applicant's ambitions for a site and points for discussion in meetings. I remember having applications for demolition and rebuild as a case officer, and I struggled with the sustainability angle at the time. And now these topics are becoming increasingly scrutinised, and yet standard policy approaches are still trying to catch up on issues such as demolition, the circular economy, and whole life carbon. The checklist here provides simple yes/no questions, as shown here on the GLA circular economy guidance decision tree. And they set out key considerations before an application is submitted, because generally by then, most decisions have already been made for a site. For example, is there an existing building on the site? Is it technically feasible to retain the building or part of the building? It's important here to consider whether the building is structurally sound and if it's reusable. So this information is important to have at pre-application stage, as it can guide decision making for development options. And it also will help officers to question proposals that have proceeded to a demolition option. It is the intention here that by using the pre-app checklists, planning applications gradually coming through the system will be guided to consider these issues up front, and there will be a shift towards greater circularity. Next slide, please. So the toolkit also includes full planning checklists. The checklist for the circular economy has been drafted with the recognition that case officers deal with many supporting documents that they have to review and consider within their application. Now, the circular economy criteria here has been broken down with space for applicants to provide further information. So this helps officers identify whether the criteria has been met or further information is needed. And it also helps to ensure applicants are aware of the level of information required within the circular economy statement. So this has been a very brief introduction into this part of the toolkit, but I really hope that you find it useful. So now I will pass you over to Suzanne and Helen. Thank you.
Thank you, Nicola. Hi, my name is Suzanne Kimmen. I'm the Climate Change Manager at Haringey Council. I work across both planning and sustainability, but I sit within carbon management. So I will be introducing the study Delivering Net Zero and also its scope, and then I'll hand over to Helen to talk about the details and the conclusions as well of the study. So next slide, please. So along with 17 other boroughs, we led on this evidence study to support bringing in planning policies to deliver net zero carbon developments. This study was delivered by a consortium of leading energy consultants in the industry, led by Etude. Next slide, please. So the primary aim of this study, well, the initial aim really, was to update an earlier study that was published in 2020. This was the Towards Net Zero Carbon study, also led by Haringey with 4 other London boroughs. The aim of this initial first study was to deliver greater carbon reductions on sites, and it also recommended a new carbon offset price and mechanism. Since this was published, Part L 2021 was implemented, so we needed to understand the implications on this on current and future policies. The 2023 study therefore aimed to test the viability in going beyond the current London Plan and Part L 2021 requirements. It's worth noting that this was focused on new buildings only and not retrofit buildings. The study also included 2 heat network scenarios for 2 of the archetypes to recognize the opportunity for heat networks in many of the London boroughs. You'll see on the right that this study modeled and set out recommendations for 2 policy options in local plans. So first, policy option 1, which is effectively the business as usual in line with the London Plan. This modeled compliance with Part L 2021. It uses a single metric to measure the performance of a development as a percentage reduction in regulated carbon emissions. Policy option 2 looks to move away from the carbon metrics. It's based on predictive energy modeling, and it proposes a series of absolute energy targets. So these are space heating demand and total energy use, which is the energy use intensity. Both are measured in kilowatt hours per square meter per year. And then there's a third metric as well, which is based on the renewable energy production, which is measured in either kilowatt hours per square meter per year or the kilowatt hours per square meter of the building footprint per year. And both of those policy options also consider the ban on gas boilers in developments themselves. So I'll now hand over to Helen to talk about the details of the study. Thank you.
Thanks, Suzanne. Could we move to the next slide, please? I'm a Senior Planning Policy Officer at Haringey, by the way. So the study modelled 8 different archetypes to test these 2 different policy options, and cost consultants Curry and Brown also undertook cost analysis for each of these scenarios. So there were 4 domestic types that were looked at and 4 non-domestic. And we, as a group of 18 boroughs, discussed and agreed together which examples should be chosen, which were most useful for us as a group. And some case studies were drawn actually from cases which some of the boroughs have got sort of had on their books. And then those 8 different building types were tested against 24 different scenarios. So 3 different fabric and ventilation scenarios, business as usual, good practice, and then an ultra low energy fabric and ventilation strategy. They were also tested against 4 different heating systems. So those were gas boiler scenarios, direct electric, a less efficient heat pump and a more efficient heat pump. And then also they were tested for scenarios that were both including and not including solar PVs. Next slide, please. So some of the key conclusions or recommendations from the study. The consultant's recommendation was that a policy option 2 approach, so the more passive house approach based on 2 different metrics that Suzanne explained, would be more effective at delivering net zero carbon development. The EUI intensity, the energy use intensity and space heating demand policy targets were provided. The recommendations were made by the consultants on what those new targets should be for emerging planning policies. Equivalent targets against the policy option 1, the business as usual approach and methodology that aligns with the current London Plan approach, were also given. So those were given in terms of policy targets that relate to percentage carbon reductions that developments should demonstrate they can achieve. And then also the consultants provided recommendations on appropriate carbon offset pricing for planning policies that use percentage carbon reduction targets, And also they provided some recommendations on energy offset pricing. So what that may look like if boroughs introduce new targets that align with a policy option 2 approach. So we're also, as a group of 18 boroughs, monitoring and collaborating and then sort of undertaking ongoing meetings together as a group to watch how these policies sort of come together and support one another and collaborate in the spirit of also what the London councils are doing. So we've had Merton and RBKC have been the first boroughs to start using this evidence base as part of their examination process, and several boroughs will be going ahead with using this evidence base over the coming months for the next stage in their local plan reviews. So thank you, and I'll hand back to, I think it's Rob.
Great, thank you very much, everyone. So I think we're going to move on to some questions now. So we have got, we can pick up the questions from anywhere, but there is a Q&A function. So you can put your questions in there. If you would prefer to ask your question rather than type it in, then please just put up your hand, and Kirsten or Catherine, who are sort of moderating the event, should be able to let you in so that you can ask it if that's easier than typing away in the chat, and we'll pick that up. But while you're thinking, please ask if you'd like the speakers to tell you a bit more about something or explain something a bit better. We're happy to do that as well. But while you're just thinking about what questions you might want to ask, I wonder if I could just kick off and maybe ask Rachel, if you were able just to say, I guess, a little bit more about how you anticipate the boroughs being able to use the toolkit, and if there's any particular area, for example, I was thinking about the model policies, but there might be some other areas that you want to say a little bit more about, how they were developed and how you see boroughs using those within their own kind of planning policy teams.
It's a good question. So some of the documents in the toolkit are drawing on best practice and examples, best examples that we can find from across London for how those boroughs have approached ideas. So some of them are kind of ideas that you can build on, take the best from, and adapt them to your own borough. Some of the documents are more rounded than that, and they touch on experiences throughout different councils and different approaches, different ideas that are coming through. So there's kind of a mixture of things. I would very much say that it covers really some of the key kind of questions and areas of discussion that we've encountered in the working group that supports the programme. Issues that come up again and again of how do you measure emissions, what is in place to even encourage applicants to demonstrate their emissions effectively. So we've really listened to what common experiences are and look to see where the opportunities to help boroughs going forward are.
Great, thank you. And as I think we mentioned earlier, you mentioned earlier, it's an iterative toolkit. So I think you're looking for also suggestions about what other areas might be valuable and where might people both feedback on how to kind of use it, but also other areas that might be considered as additional sort of subject areas to consider.
Yes, absolutely. We've identified these areas of work, but we're really interested to hear what other boroughs have experienced and where they see additional kind of help being needed or clarity or understanding. The great way to feed into that work, I mean, obviously we're really pleased to hear from you when you've got a thought, but what we'd really, really like is for people to join the low carbon development working group, so that those ideas can be properly explored, and the information that you have and the reason that you've identified an issue, we can really understand and unpick and see where the opportunities are to give some guidance or best practice.
Brilliant, thank you. So obviously some of the tools have already started to be used and tested. Nicola, I wonder if you could, if you've had any feedback, both from kind of planning teams and also developers who have started to use, for example, the pre-app checklist, any feedback you've kind of gathered around how that's being used, how that might be helping people. What sort of feedback have you had so far?
Thank you. So we've been adapting pre-app frameworks on these issues for a while, and we have had now applications coming through the system. As I said, gradually those will start to appear where those issues are considered upfront at pre-application, and it filters through into the planning application where buildings may be retained because they are structurally sound and can be reused, or you can consider more circular economy principles in terms of reusing elements of a building or building materials. So they are coming through the process, and I really encourage officers to use these checklists, even if there isn't maybe a policy in place yet in the borough's local plans, because these are current issues, and if you just ask developers these questions, then they might think of different development options that may be best used for the site.
Amazing, thank you. Just one last question from me, and then let me know if there's any that participants would like to ask or any comments that they have. Suzanne or Helen, I mean, you mentioned briefly about, obviously this is a study that was being undertaken once and then repeated to kind of update, and you'll see you're focusing now on implementation. You touched on that briefly, Helen, toward the end, but I wonder if you want to say a little bit more about where you see the opportunities for implementation. How can the study perhaps, where do you see that implementation opportunity? And also you mentioned some of the boroughs coming together to kind of look at that study and think about what it means for them in their local context. How can people follow up and find out a little bit more and maybe get involved in that and talk to you more about that work?
Thank you. So on the second point, please we'll share our email with the email that goes out following this event, and we welcome any interest from other boroughs who weren't part of the original group of 18 who want to join. We have had a couple of boroughs joining since. Newham and Kingston have joined following on from completion of the report, and there was a unanimous feeling amongst the group that the more of us collaborating on this, the better. In terms of implementation, we had several meetings with the GLA throughout the development of this evidence study, and we shared a draft version with them before it was finalised. As we recognise that the recommendations of the report do look to go beyond what the London Plan, the current adopted London Plan, sets out in policy. So there, in terms of implementation, at the moment we have a particularly large group of boroughs who are probably more at a Regulation 18 stage of their local plans, but equally several who are starting to go to a Regulation 19 consultation on their local plans. And there are some others within the group who will be looking to introduce new carbon offset pricing within their SPDs and planning guidance. So boroughs within the group are using the recommendations of the study for a variety of planning policy related reasons. I'd say the majority of us are looking to directly kind of take some of those recommended policy targets and put them into our local plan policies. But there are also people within the group who will be looking at updating their offset pricing guidance and things like that. So, Suzanne, is there anything that you want to add that I've missed?
Yeah, I just wanted to add on the implementation side that it's been really helpful to kind of understand how developments are performing currently under Part L 2021 as well. So it's not just for planning policy, but also for development management applications. So if anyone wants to have a look at some of the modeling outputs, I recommend doing so using the archetypes.
Brilliant, thank you. We've had some questions. So first of all, I think the first question will be for Suzanne or Helen. So it's a question from Wilson who asks, will option 2 work alongside the London Plan's existing requirements for minimum onset reduction of 35% beyond Part L? So for example, is this intended to be an additional local requirement? And then Rachel, I'll come to you with a question about which boroughs you're working with at the moment. If you want to see the text of that, Helen or Suzanne, I think it might be in the chat rather than the Q&A.
Yes, I can see the question. Thank you for the question. I think this is probably one of the biggest questions we were dealing with as well during the study preparation and delivery. So the way that we feel that this is a complementary local requirements to the London Plan requirements, to put it simply. Because of the way that the study has been framed, you can see that the performance of developments that comply with the London Plan requirements have also been modelled through predictive energy modelling. And although they are not directly comparable, the aim is to go beyond the London Plan requirements that have currently been set out in terms of the 35% reduction. So in our view, the policy option 2 goes beyond the London Plan and therefore also delivers that zero carbon development policy aim, which is the overarching aim of the policy. This is, by the way, something we have also been discussing with the GLA. So they are aware of this, this argument. And they broadly agree with that from our discussions.
Excellent, thank you. We've got another question, Rachel, around which groups are currently part of the low carbon development theme. It might be that one of your colleagues is involved, but you're not sure, so it's always helpful to share a little bit about that. And a second one, are GLA currently part of the group as well? Do you want to say a little bit about who's working with you on working group?
We were keen when we were setting up the structure, the governance structure for the low carbon development programme, that we represented London boroughs across the spectrum, because we're all probably aware that the built environment in Westminster is quite different to the built environment in Barnet. So it was good to get representation from different boroughs to feed into the group. But I can tell you that we have people regularly attend from Tower Hamlets, Kingston, Hammersmith and Fulham, Lambeth, Barnet, Camden, Islington, Barking and Dagenham, Hounslow, Newham, Southwark, Greenwich, Kensington, Richmond, Westminster. But we also obviously invite, and they regularly attend the GLA when they're able to, because it's a great opportunity to feed ideas through to the GLA and make them aware of issues that boroughs are encountering. Have I answered those questions? Hugh, your question around does the circular economy checklist apply to all major development? There isn't currently a requirement that it does, but I know that part of the function of the checklists are to give councils confidence to ask majors ideas around those issues. So you may not be able to directly require them, but it's really good to get applicants to think of those for majors in the general context. Even if they don't do it this time, maybe they'll do it next time, if they understand that's the way that councils are going, and that's our understanding of where applicants should be going.
Great, thank you very much. We can, the question from Amandine about Brent, we will double check and let you know whether there are any colleagues from Brent who have been participating in either steering group or working group or any of the kind of subgroups associated, and we'll perhaps drop you a line directly so you can either follow up, and if not, we'll follow up and ask you whether you'd like to be involved. Let me turn to a question around kind of updating the toolkit. It's a really important part. We've talked about kind of developing it and adding to it, but I wonder, Rachel, if you wanted to say anything about plans for updating it.
We're hoping, from the great feedback that we get through this session and from people's using of the toolkit, that ideas will be coming through, and we intend to regularly update the toolkit every, I'd like to say, 2 months to quarterly is our intention. Obviously, if there's a great big push and we need to change something very quickly, we'll do that sooner.
Great. And I should say that we will mention at the end, but we are expanding the support team for the programme at London Councils. So we'll have some people that you can directly contact who can take feedback on the toolkit as well and funnel that through so that we're able to keep on top of feedback and updates going forward. We have a question from Catherine Slade. I wonder, is that one that is aimed at Suzanne and Helen? Do you want to respond to that one? Any feedback you've had from the GLA?
Yes, so we presented the initial modelling results to the GLA, and they did confirm that the results mirrored the ones that they had seen as well. It's worth mentioning that their archetypes are different to ours. You know, they might be the same use class, but for example, if it's an office building, we might have had a different number of stories involved in that. So we can't still, again, we cannot directly compare those results between the GLA and our findings in that sense. So they did agree on that, but also I think when you model these archetypes in Part L 2021, the way that especially the non-domestic side of things has been set up, it's very complicated, because as soon as you change a ventilation system or a heating system, the baseline changes as well. It's too complicated to go into now, but that effectively means that the results are maybe not as transparent as they could be. So if you see a 35% reduction on one scheme but a 15 on the other, it doesn't necessarily mean that one is better than the other. So this is another reason why I think it's really important that policy option 2 sets out a better, more predicted performance for developments and closes that performance gap. So the GLA have recognized that informally to us as well. And
Great.
Don't know if it's worth answering Jack's question underneath.
Yeah.
As well. Yes, there are quite a few boroughs who are poised to implement policy option 2. That includes us as well, although we haven't published our Regulation 18 plan yet. But yeah, I don't have the full list in front of me right now, but we can look that up if that's useful. And also it's worth noting that Bath and North East Somerset and Cornwall have adopted policies that match policy option 2 as well. And I know that Leeds is also publishing. Basically across the country, we're seeing councils implementing this option.
I would also say that Kensington and Chelsea, I think, made the move to policy 2 at their main mod stage, and the inspector was supportive of that change.
Brilliant, thank you. So a growing movement, of which, as excellent to see London Boroughs kind of in the vanguard, along with other places in the country. And there's some other comments in the chat around, you know, other boroughs who are looking at this as well and seeing how far they can get and how quickly. I'm just checking if there's any final questions. As we say, it's an ongoing conversation, and we will follow up with some information after the event so that you've got those questions and responses. But can I hand over to Rob to close the event?
Yeah, thank you, Hannah. Hi, everyone. I'm Rob Szosowski. I'm the Assistant Director for Planning, Building Standards and Sustainability at Haringey Council, covering planning and building control, but also leading on climate and sustainability and transport and things like that across the council. So great to see so many participants join today, and some familiar faces in there as well, some familiar names. So I'm just going to be giving the closing remarks for the event, and then that's the end of today's launch event. So yeah, a bit about Haringey. So we're really pleased. We're taking up the co-chairing role of the low carbon development theme with Hackney, who've been chairing it for the last few years. So firstly, just a thank you to Natalie and Rachel at Hackney, who've been leading on this work over the last few years, that have resulted in this toolkit that we've got in front of us now, which I hope is a useful tool for everyone to use. So a big thank you for them for their work so far. But don't worry, Hackney aren't going anywhere, and it's not like a government cabinet reshuffle where everything's just going to change overnight and David Cameron's going to appear in the corner. We are co-chairing it, so Hackney are continuing to co-chair with myself at Haringey and with colleagues Suzanne and Helen and others involved. So yeah, we're taking up the lead on this, but we can only do that with the input of all of you guys that are participating and all the other London boroughs. So it's really important we work together. So at Haringey, we're really ambitious about tackling climate change, including through the built environment. Our cabinet member, and probably similar to some of your cabinet members, has asked us to push the envelope. And that's a quote from him: push the envelope on planning and planning policy to tackle climate change through our new local plan. So we're really up for that challenge, and I know all of you attending are up for that challenge too. And like many other authorities, we've declared a climate emergency and we're implementing a climate change action plan, and we're bringing our planning policies up to date with all of that as well. And let's be honest, there is a bit of a policy vacuum at a national level, and there has been for some time. And rather than us all sit around waiting for a decent national policy, I think this is where local government and London councils have a really important role to play, that we can fill that vacuum, and that's what people are doing, and that's really exciting to see. So we're actually at the cutting edge of that and pushing and shaping that, and hopefully that may shape national policy in the future as well. So all of your work and input into this will actually have a really big impact, and we're really filling that gap. So I think this is a really important role for all of us as planners and climate experts to feed into this, so you can genuinely shape something here and being part of this. So I find that quite exciting. And I'm a strong believer in safety in numbers. No one council wants to be the first to put their head above the parapet and do something a bit risky and risk getting thrown out at examination, although some do that, and I commend them that do that. But it is always a bit of a risk, and you do always wonder if you should take that risk. So that's why I think safety in numbers, working with our London Borough colleagues through London councils, is really important, to know that if you get challenged by an inspector, you can say, oh, well, this other council's doing it and this other one, and we've got this joint evidence base. So for me, that's really strong. And I think the planning inspectorate and other people, even developers out there, will see that and will take that on board. So I think we should really use our strength in numbers on that. I know that sounds a bit corny, but I really do think that can have a big impact. So it's great that the work that Helen and Suzanne touched upon, that people have fed in to, has already been used by a number of yourselves participating today. So it's great to see that in emerging local plans. So that's absolutely wonderful, from the work on towards net zero. And I know there's lots of other work with Letty on planning policies and embedding this in other ways through planning policies. And the toolkit launched today, that you've got the link in the chat, is just another tool in our armory to use, and hopefully you can draw upon that. So haven't got long left in the meeting, so 4 actions to take away for you all in the last few minutes that you can start to have a think about. So number 1 is have a look at the toolkit. You've got the link in the chat, so do go through that. I'm sure you've started to look through it already, and there's some really useful pointers in there, and share that with your colleagues and with your teams. So have a look at the toolkit is number 1. Number 2, we're open to suggestions to add to the toolkit or to update it, as touched upon briefly a minute ago. It's still a work in progress to some degree, and we all know the policy context is constantly changing. So we are open to suggestions to add to the toolkit and build on that. So we have 2 new colleagues joining London councils, called Alice Addison and Ashwin Patel, and their email addresses are going to be put in the chat. So they're the point of contact for any suggestions to update the toolkit. So they're the London Council colleagues as the point of contact for that. So open to ideas to add to the toolkit and expand it. Hopefully you're full of ideas after this session. Number 3, action number 3, please do get involved in the wider low carbon development work. You're very welcome to join and see people who are interested asking which boroughs are in already. So again, please do join your work on that. And again, you can contact Alice and Ashwin, whose email addresses have just been put into the chat to get in touch and join that. And also, in addition to that, action number 4, my final one, is you can sign up to London Council's newsletter on climate that's sent out every month. So again, we'll provide the link to that too. So yeah, so with that call to action, we'll be bringing this event to a close. But yeah, we're very grateful to Hannah and colleagues at London Councils for coordinating this group for us and for organising this event to share with all the London boroughs the work done so far. So recap on the actions, have a look at the toolkit, put forward any suggestions to the toolkit to add to it, get involved in the low carbon development work stream if you're interested, and sign up to the monthly London Council's newsletter. So thank you to everyone on the panel. Thanks to all of you participants for joining the launch event today. We hope it's been useful, and we will close the event there, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your day, everyone. Thank you very much.